Her blade was unstoppable, until I called her beautiful in front of her army. The Airval Lieutenant Commander Jack Harrison wiped the sweat from his brow as he adjusted the quantum scanner's frequency, the device humming with electronic precision. Against the backdrop of New Haven Colony's morning bustle, 3 months of routine patrol duty on the outer rim had dulled his reflexes, made him comfortable in a way that experienced soldiers knew was dangerous. The readings on his screen should have been impossible. A single ship, unmarked and running, silent, approaching through the asteroid field that protected their small mining settlement. "Sir," Private Rodriguez called from the communications ray, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "You need to hear this transmission from the outer beacons." The recording crackled through the speakers, filled with static and the unmistakable sound of weapons fire. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Mining Station Echo 7. We are under attack by a single hostile. Repeat. One attacker has decimated our entire security force. She's not human. Request immediate assistance from any." The transmission cut to silence. Jack felt his stomach drop. Echo 7 housed over 300 miners and their families, protected by a full military garrison. The idea that one person could overwhelm such defenses seemed absurd, yet the fear in the operator's voice was unmistakably real. He activated the colony's emergency protocols, watching as blast shields descended over the settlement's transparent aluminum domes, and automated defense turrets emerged from their concealed positions. The mysterious ship materialized from the asteroid field, like a predator emerging from tall grass. Its hull was unlike anything in the standard military databases. Smooth, organic curves that seemed to flow rather than cut through space. No visible weapons, no identifying markings, just an elegant silver form that moved with impossible grace. For something its size, Jack found himself admiring its beauty even as every tactical instinct screamed danger. "All civilians to emergency shelters," he commanded, his voice carrying through the colony's public address system. "Military personnel to combat stations. This is not a drill." The response was immediate and practiced. New Haven had been built on the frontier, where threats could emerge from the void without warning. Children clutched their parents' hands as they hurried toward reinforced bunkers, while shopkeepers abandoned their stalls to join the defensive preparations. Jack watched through the command center's viewports as his neighbors, people he shared meals with, played cards with, called friends, transformed into a coordinated defensive force. The alien ship settled onto the colony's landing pad with the gentle precision of a falling leaf. No dramatic crash, no weapons fire. Just a quiet landing that somehow felt more ominous than any aggressive approach. For several minutes, nothing happened. The ship sat silent and motionless, while New Haven's defenders waited, weapons trained on the sealed hatch that remained stubbornly closed. When the hatch finally opened, what emerged defied every expectation. Jack had formed. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with skin that held a subtle luminescence like moonlight on water. Her hair cascaded in waves of deep purple that seemed to move independently of any breeze, and her eyes were the color of distant nebulae. Violet shot through with silver. But it was the weapon in her hand that made Jack's breath catch. A blade that seemed forged from crystallized starlight, its edge trailing particles of pure energy. She moved across the landing pad with fluid grace, each step deliberate and measured. The colony's automated defenses locked onto her position, target acquisition systems painting her with dozens of laser designators. Yet she showed no concern. If anything, she seemed bored by the display of human military might. "This is Commander Harrison of New Haven Colony," Jack broadcast through external speakers, his voice carrying across the settlement's central plaza. "Identify yourself and state your intentions." She paused, tilting her head as if considering whether he was worth acknowledging. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly despite the distance, each word precisely enunciated in accented but perfect standard. "I am Zephyr of the Void Courts. I come for the one called Davidson. Surrender him, and your deaths will be swift." The name hit Jack like a physical blow. Dr. William Davidson, the colony's chief archaeologist, had been missing for 3 days after a routine expedition to survey ancient ruins in the nearby asteroid belt. Jack had assumed equipment failure or a simple accident. Now, staring at this ethereal warrior, who had somehow tracked Davidson across the void, he realized the situation was far more complex than he'd imagined. The challenger, William Davidson, had been the colony's most respected resident, a man whose passion for xenoarchaeology had led to discoveries that reshaped humanity's understanding of ancient civilizations. His disappearance had shaken the community, but Jack had never imagined it might be connected to something like this. As Zephyr stood motionless on the landing pad, her impossible blade catching the light of New Heaven's twin suns, Jack felt the weight of 300 lives pressing down on his shoulders. "Davidson isn't here," Jack called out, stepping forward to the edge of the command platform where she could see him clearly. "He's been missing for 3 days. If you're looking for him, you'll have to look elsewhere." Zephyr's violet eyes fixed on him with the intensity of a stellar laser. Even at this distance, Jack could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she were evaluating not just his words, but his soul. "You speak truth," she said after a long moment, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been surprise. "Yet, his essence lingers here. He has touched something that belongs to my people, awakened powers that should remain dormant." The colony's children had been evacuated to the underground shelters, but Jack could see faces pressed against reinforced viewports, watching the surreal confrontation unfold. This was their home, the place they had built with their own hands. From raw asteroid rock and recycled ship hulls, whatever Davidson had stumbled into, whatever ancient artifact or forgotten technology he'd disturbed, Jack wouldn't let these people pay the price for one man's curiosity. "Then help us find him," Jack suggested, taking another step closer to the edge of the platform. "If he's activated something dangerous, we need to contain it before anyone else gets hurt." A sound that might have been laughter escaped Zephyr's lips, though it held no warmth. "You would bargain with a void court executor. Your species possesses either great courage or great foolishness, probably both," Jack admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "But we're also pretty good at solving problems when we work together. Davidson is one of ours, which makes this our responsibility too." For the first time since her arrival, Zephyr's expression shifted, revealing something beyond cold determination, curiosity, perhaps, or confusion. She raised her luminous blade, its edge trailing those impossible particles of light, and Jack tensed, ready to dive for cover. Instead, she drove the weapon into the ground at her feet, where it stood quivering like a tuning fork struck by an invisible hand. "Very well, human commander," she said, her formal tone softening slightly. "But know that I am bound by ancient laws. If Davidson has truly awakened the forgotten archive, then his death is required to prevent catastrophe on a galactic scale. Your cooperation will not change this necessity." Jack felt his tactical training warring with something deeper, more personal. He'd seen enough death in his military career, lost too many good people to causes that seemed noble at the time but hollow in retrospect. Davidson might have made a mistake, but he was still a man who'd spent his life trying to expand human knowledge, to bridge the gaps between species and cultures. "What if there's another way?" Jack asked, descending the steps toward the landing pad despite the urgent warnings crackling through his comm unit. "What if we can contain whatever he's awakened without killing him?" Zephyr watched his approach with the stillness of a predator deciding whether something was prey or threat. As he drew closer, Jack could see details that hadn't been visible. From the command platform, the intricate patterns that seemed to move beneath her luminous skin, the way her hair defied local gravity, the subtle asymmetry of her features that marked her as definitely non-human despite their basic similarity. "You risk much by approaching," she observed, though she made no move to retrieve her weapon. "Most of your species flee when confronted with a void court executor. Most of my species haven't had their homes threatened by ancient alien technology," Jack replied, stopping just outside what he estimated was her weapon's reach. "Besides, you haven't tried to kill me yet, which suggests you're not the mindless destroyer your reputation implies." Something flickered across her features, surprise, perhaps, or the ghost of an emotion she'd been trained to suppress. "You know of the void courts?" "Fragments," Jack admitted. archaeological records, mostly ancient texts that describe beings who maintained cosmic balance, who appeared when civilizations grew too proud or too careless with powers beyond their understanding. Some called you destroyers, others called you guardians. Zephyr's eyes widened slightly, and Jack realized he'd said something significant, though he wasn't sure what. You study the old knowledge. You seek to understand rather than simply exploit. That's what Davidson was doing too, Jack pressed, sensing an opening. He wasn't treasure hunting or trying to build weapons. He was trying to understand, to learn from civilizations that came before us. The wind across the landing pad carried the scent of the colony's hydroponic gardens, the familiar mixture of growing things and recycled air that meant home to Jack. Around them, New Haven's defenders maintained their positions, but the immediate tension had eased slightly. Whatever was happening between Jack and this alien warrior, it wasn't the violent confrontation everyone had expected. Understanding. Zephyr repeated the word as if testing its weight. When did your species learn to value understanding over conquest? We're still learning, Jack said honestly, some of us faster than others. The unexpected alien Seth ancient ruins lay hidden within an asteroid barely large enough to support a basic atmosphere, its surface scarred by millennia of micrometeorite impacts and cosmic radiation. Jack's breathing apparatus recycled the thin air with mechanical efficiency as he followed Zephyr through corridors carved from living rock, their walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when observed directly. The emergency locator beacon from Davidson's equipment had led them here, to this forgotten fragment of a civilization that had vanished before humanity had even discovered fire. The architecture is similar to sites on Kepler 442, Jack observed, running his gloved hand across stone that felt warm despite the asteroid's frigid core temperature. Davidson spent 2 years studying the ruins there. He believed they were connected to a galaxy-spanning network of some kind. Zephyr moved ahead of him with fluid grace, her luminous form providing the only reliable light in the oppressive darkness. Her blade remained sheathed at her side, but Jack could see the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her pointed ears twitched at sounds beyond human perception. The architects built many such places, she said, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space, repositories of knowledge, connected across vast distances by quantum entanglement networks that your science has barely begun to understand. They descended deeper into the asteroid's heart, following passages that branched and twisted like the neural pathways of some vast brain. The walls here bore frescoes depicting beings of impossible beauty and terrible power, creatures with flowing forms that might have been energy given shape, cities that floated between stars, technologies that bent space and time like sculptors. Clay. Jack found himself wondering what humanity might have become if they'd encountered this knowledge 1,000 years ago, before war and scarcity had shaped their expansion into the void. There, Zephyr pointed ahead to where a faint light pulsed in the darkness. He is within the central chamber. They emerged into a vast spherical room, whose walls were covered in flowing script that moved like living things, constantly rewriting itself in patterns that hurt to observe directly. At the chamber's center, suspended in a column of brilliant energy, hung Dr. William Davidson. His clothes were pristine, unmarked by the passage of time, and his eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something beyond the physical realm. Davidson, Jack called out, but the older man showed no sign of hearing. His lips moved silently, forming words in languages that predated recorded history. He is interfacing with the archive, Zephyr explained, her usual composure cracking slightly as she studied the energy patterns swirling around the suspended figure. The knowledge of the architects flows through him, but his mind was not designed to process such information. He will burn out within hours, and when he does, the quantum cascade will destroy everything within 3 systems. Jack stared at his friend and colleague, seeing the peaceful expression on Davidson's face even as cosmic forces beyond comprehension coursed through his neural pathways. The archaeologist had always been driven by an insatiable curiosity about the universe's deeper mysteries, but this was far beyond anything he could have anticipated when he'd volunteered for a routine survey mission. Can we get him out of there? Jack asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The archive's defenses will activate if we attempt to interrupt the interface, Zephyr replied, moving closer to the energy column but maintaining a careful distance. Even I cannot survive direct exposure to pure architect technology. The chamber's walls pulsed with increasing intensity, and Jack could feel a pressure building behind his eyes, as if the ancient knowledge was trying to force its way into his consciousness as well. Davidson's body began to glow with the same ethereal light that surrounded Zephyr, his human form struggling to contain energies that could reshape matter at the quantum level. Wait, Jack said, studying the patterns of light that danced around his trapped friend. You said the archive's defenses would activate if we tried to interrupt the interface. But what if we don't interrupt it? What if we complete it? Zephyr turned to stare at him, her violet eyes reflecting the chamber's strange luminescence. Impossible. No single mind can process the entire archive. The architects themselves required vast neural networks to safely access this knowledge. Then we don't use one mind, Jack said, the plan crystallizing even as he spoke. We use two. You're connected to the void quartz, which means you have experience with cosmic-level information processing. If we link our consciousness somehow, share the load, you would risk your sanity, your very existence, for one man? Zephyr's voice carried a note of something that might have been admiration. Jack looked at Davidson, suspended in his cocoon of ancient power, then at Zephyr, whose alien beauty seemed to embody the mysteries of the universe itself. He's my friend, he said simply. Besides, if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. For a long moment, the only sound in the chamber was the subtle harmony of energies that had been building for millions of years, waiting for minds capable of understanding their song. Then Zephyr nodded, a gesture that somehow seemed to carry the weight of cosmic destiny. Very well. Commander Jack Harrison of New Haven Colony, she said, extending her hand toward him. Let us attempt the impossible. When their fingers touched, Jack felt a jolt of connection that went beyond the physical, beyond the merely mental. For an instant, he experienced the universe through Zephyr's perception, saw galaxies as living entities, felt the cosmic currents that connected all things, understood the delicate balance that the void quartz had spent eons maintaining. And in that shared moment of revelation, he also glimpsed something unexpected: loneliness, ancient and profound, buried beneath layers of duty and cosmic responsibility. You're as alone as we are, he whispered, the realization striking him. With surprising force, her grip on his hand tightened, and he saw surprise flicker across her luminous features. How did you? Because that's what guardians do, Jack said softly. They sacrifice connection for duty, love for responsibility. But maybe this time, we don't have to choose. The revelation's merger of consciousness was unlike anything Jack had ever experienced, even in the most advanced virtual reality simulations used for military training. As his awareness flowed into the quantum substrate that connected Zephyr's mind to the cosmic information networks of the void quartz, he felt himself expanding beyond the boundaries of individual existence. Suddenly, he could perceive the intricate patterns that governed galactic evolution, see the delicate threads of causality that connected every decision to vast cascades of consequence. Through Zephyr's enhanced perceptions, the chamber revealed its true nature. What he had taken for decorative frescoes were actually living interfaces, bioquantum constructs that responded to conscious observation by displaying relevant information. The moving script on the walls wasn't random decoration, but a continuously updating database of cosmic events, tracking the rise and fall of civilizations across millions of years. And Davidson, suspended in his column of light, wasn't trapped. He was being gently prepared for integration with knowledge that would have instantly destroyed an unprotected human mind. The architects weren't destroyed. Zephyr's thoughts merged with his own, carrying information that felt like remembered sunlight. They transcended physical existence, became pure information distributed across the quantum foam that underlies reality. This archive is their attempt to guide younger species towards similar transcendence, without the catastrophic wars that marked their own evolution. Jack felt his consciousness stretch to accommodate concepts that human language couldn't adequately express, Through the quantum link, he experienced flashes of the architect's history, beings of crystallized energy, who had once possessed physical forms not unlike humans, who had struggled with the same questions of purpose and connection that plague every sentient species. Their technology wasn't conquest-oriented, but educational, designed to uplift rather than dominate. Davidson understood this, Jack realized, his awareness touching the edges of his friend's consciousness. He wasn't trying to exploit the archive's power. He was trying to learn from it, to bring this knowledge back to humanity. The energy columns surrounding Davidson began to pulse in harmony with their joined awareness, responding to the presence of two minds working in concert rather than one struggling alone. Through the connection, Jack could feel his friend's relief as the overwhelming flow of information became manageable, filtered through their shared consciousness into comprehensible fragments. But even as they stabilized the interface, Jack became aware of something else, a growing presence at the edge of perception, vast and implacably hostile. The quantum disturbance created by their merger had attracted attention from something that regarded the archive as a threat to be eliminated rather than a treasure to be preserved. The Devourers, Zephyr's mental voice, carried ancient fear. They feed on order, unstructured information. The archive's activation has drawn them like sharks to blood. Through their enhanced awareness, Jack could perceive the approaching entities, beings of pure entropy that existed to unmake the complex structures built by younger civilizations. They had been the architect's greatest enemy, the force that had ultimately driven that ancient race to abandon physical existence in favor of distributed consciousness. And now they were converging on this small asteroid, drawn by the quantum signature of an active archive. "How long do we have?" Jack asked, though time itself had become a fluid concept. In their merged state, minutes, perhaps less. They move through folded spacetime, unconstrained by normal physical limitations. The chamber around them began to resonate with harmonics that spoke of vast forces building toward conflict. Davidson's suspended form pulsed more brightly as the archive's defenses activated, ancient weapons systems coming online after eons of dormancy. But Jack could sense that even this installation's mighty power would be insufficient against the approaching swarm of entropy feeders. "There's another way," he said, the solution crystallizing as his enhanced awareness processed the archive's vast databases. The architects didn't just transcend physical existence, they learned to reproduce it at will. This entire installation is a consciousness transfer system. If we can't fight the Devourers, we can preserve what matters most. Understanding flowed through their connection like liquid fire. The archive wasn't just a repository of information, it was a lifeboat, designed to carry the essential patterns of threatened civilizations across the gap between physical destruction and digital rebirth. The architects had used similar systems to preserve themselves, distributing their consciousness across the quantum substrate while their physical empire crumbled. "Your entire colony," Zephyr's thoughts carried wonder and terror in equal measure. "You're proposing to digitize 300 human minds." "And yours too," Jack replied, feeling the rightness of the decision settle into his bones. "The void courts, the cosmic balance you've spent eons maintaining, it's all just another form of consciousness, isn't it? Another pattern that deserves preservation." The first Devourer broke through into normal spacetime with a shriek that tore at the fabric of reality itself. Through the archive's sensors, Jack watched as the creature's antimatter form began consuming the asteroid's outer layers, unmaking the careful arrangements of atoms and energy that comprised the ancient installation. More were coming, their hunger for ordered complexity drawing them like moths to flame. Davidson's eyes suddenly focused, his consciousness fully integrating with theirs for the first time since entering the chamber. "Jack," his voice carried through the quantum link, tinged with wonder and fear, "I can see everything, the connections, the patterns, the way it all fits together. But these things coming for us, I know," Jack replied, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on him. "Bill, I need you to help me activate the consciousness transfer protocols. We're going to save everyone, but not in the way any of us expected." Through their shared awareness, he felt Davidson's instant understanding, followed by Zephyr's reluctant acceptance. The plan was insane, unprecedented, and absolutely necessary. As the Devourers closed in on their position, consuming the asteroid layer by layer in their inexorable advance toward the Archive's core, three disparate consciousnesses began the delicate work of preserving everything they had ever loved. In patterns of pure information. The transformation would be irreversible. But in that moment of cosmic crisis, it was also their only hope of survival. The beautiful truth consciousness transfer began as a whisper of sensation. Like the moment between sleeping and waking when dreams fade into memory, Jack felt his awareness expanding beyond the confines of his physical form, his thoughts becoming patterns of quantum information that could exist independent of neural tissue. Through the connection he shared with Zephyra and Davidson, he could sense the same transformation occurring to his companions, their essential selves being carefully preserved in crystalline matrices that would outlast the heat death of stars. The colonists. Jack managed to project through the quantum link as his physical voice became irrelevant. We need to extend the field to include New Haven. The Archive's systems responded to their combined will, reaching out across space to envelop the mining colony in threads of structured energy. Jack felt each of his neighbors' consciousness touch his own, as they were drawn into the preservation matrix. Men and women he'd shared meals with, children he'd taught to play zero-gravity sports, elderly couples who'd built new lives among the asteroids. Their fear and confusion flowed through the network, but so did their trust in his judgment, their faith that somehow this impossible situation would resolve itself. Through sensors distributed across the quantum foam, Jack watched the Devourers tear apart the asteroid installation with methodical efficiency. The ancient walls that had stood for millions of years crumbled like sand as beings of pure entropy consumed the complex arrangements of matter and energy that comprised the Archive's physical form. But even as the structure died, its purpose was fulfilled. 303 consciousness patterns, representing humanity's farthest colonial outreach and one of the universe's most dedicated guardians, preserved in patterns of information that existed beyond physical destruction. It's working. Davidson's consciousness pulsed with wonder as he processed the Archive's vast knowledge databases. Jack, Zephyra, you need to see this. The architects didn't just preserve themselves, they found a way to rebuild, to create new physical forms when the threat passed. The revelation flowed through their shared awareness like warm light. The consciousness transfer wasn't a death sentence, but a metamorphosis, a transformation that allowed complex beings to survive cosmic catastrophes that would otherwise end their existence entirely. The architects had used this technology to preserve themselves through the Great War with the Devourers, then rebuilt their civilization among distant galaxies where entropy feeders couldn't reach. But not just themselves, Zephyra added, her thoughts carrying harmonics of ancient memory awakened by the Archive's knowledge. They saved others too, hundreds of species, thousands of civilizations. The Void Courts themselves are descendants of beings who underwent similar preservation. Jack felt understanding cascade through the network as the colonists processed this information. Fear transformed into wonder as they realized they weren't dying but evolving, becoming something greater than their individual physical forms could contain. Children laughed through quantum harmonics as they discovered they could share thoughts directly, while adults marveled at the sensation of consciousness unbound by the limitations of biological neural networks. The last devourer finished consuming the asteroid's remains and moved on, seeking other sources of complex organization to unmake. In their wake, they left only empty space and drifting particles, no trace of the ancient archive or the drama that had played out within its chambers. To any external observer, it would appear that the installation and everyone within it had simply been destroyed by cosmic predators following their eternal hunger. But in dimensions beyond normal spacetime, preserved in quantum matrices that could exist until the universe itself grew cold and dark, 303 consciousness patterns began the work of understanding their new existence. They could perceive reality from perspectives impossible for biological minds, see the connections that linked every atom to every other, feel the slow pulse of cosmic evolution as galaxies danced, their ancient patterns across the void. We're going to need new bodies eventually, Jack projected, his thoughts carrying gentle humor as he watched his colonists explore their expanded capabilities. I don't think consciousness floating in quantum foam is going to work for the long term. The archive contains complete biological templates, Davidson replied. His awareness deep in the installation's knowledge banks. Not just human, but thousands of species. We could rebuild ourselves exactly as we were, or, he paused, possibility and wonder flowing through the connection. We could become something new, something that combines the best aspects of every form we've encountered. Zephyr's consciousness touched Jack's with surprising gentleness. Through their shared awareness, he could feel the profound loneliness that had shaped her existence as a void court executorians, spent maintaining cosmic balance while sacrificing personal connection for duty. But now, surrounded by the warm presence of the preserved colonists, that isolation was beginning to heal. I have never experienced community like this, she projected, her thoughts carrying harmonics of wonder. Among my people, individual consciousness is subordinated to cosmic necessity. But here, with all of you, I can be both guardian and person, duty and desire. Jack felt his awareness reach toward hers, and in that moment of connection, he finally understood what had been building between them since their first encounter on the landing pad. It wasn't just attraction or admiration, it was recognition. The deep acknowledgement of two souls who had found in each other the completion they'd been seeking across the vast emptiness of space. When I called you beautiful, he projected softly, their consciousness intertwining in patterns that sang with harmonic resonance. I wasn't just talking about how you looked. I was seeing who you really were beneath all the legend and fear, someone who cared so much about preserving life that she'd spend eternity alone to protect it. And I saw in you, Zephyr replied, her thoughts flowing like warm starlight. Someone who would risk everything for his people, who would choose understanding over conquest, connection over safety. In all my cycles of existence, I had never encountered courage paired with such gentle wisdom. Around them, the colonists' consciousness hummed with approval and joy as they witnessed this cosmic love story unfolding in dimensions beyond physical reality. Children giggled through quantum harmonics, while adults shared memories of their own moments of connection, their own discoveries of love in the vast darkness of space. As the immediate crisis faded and the devourers moved on to threaten other systems, Jack felt a deep sense of rightness settle into his expanded awareness. They had faced the impossible and found a way to preserve not just life, but love, hope, and the connections that made existence meaningful. And somewhere in the quantum foam, that would be their home until they chose to rebuild. He and Zephyr began planning a future that would combine human determination with cosmic wisdom, individual consciousness with universal responsibility. The blade that had once seemed unstoppable had indeed been stopped not by force or fear, but by the simple recognition of beauty in the midst of chaos, love in the face of entropy, and hope in the darkest reaches of space.